The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as the blindfold was yanked away, flooding my eyes with harsh sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice cracking in disbelief as I stared at the man who had once pulled me from the darkest chapter of my life. He stood there in his tailored navy suit, the same one he wore the night we first admitted our feelings 6 months ago, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, but his steel-gray eyes held a storm I had never seen before. My heart hammered against my ribs. Just hours earlier, I had been Alex Thompson, 29-year-old investigative reporter for the Voice of the City, tailing a tip about missing millions from the Lumina Alliance, the biggest LGBT rights foundation in New York. Ethan Caldwell, its founder and my secret mentor, had been the one who believed in me when my own parents slammed the door in my face 5 years ago. He had funded my first big story, introduced me to editors, and somewhere along the way, he had become the man I loved in quiet, stolen moments. Now I was tied to a chair in what looked like his private penthouse overlooking the Hudson, two burly men in dark jackets standing guard by the door. "Alex, listen to me," Ethan said, his voice low and steady, the same calm tone he used when he coached me through my first panic attack after coming out. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint citrus of his cologne. "I didn't have a choice. They would have killed you if I hadn't stepped in." "Killed me?" I laughed, but it came out broken. "You had me kidnapped while I was meeting my source in broad daylight in Central Park. That's your idea of protection." My mind raced back to the moment the van had screeched up beside me, strong hands dragging me inside before I could even shout. The last thing I remembered was the sharp prick of a needle in my neck. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the guards, who nodded once and slipped out, leaving us alone in the sunlit room. The city hummed far below us, oblivious. He pulled up a chair and sat facing me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was praying. "The informant you were meeting wasn't who you thought. He works for the board members who've been skimming the foundation's fund for years. They found out you were getting too close. I couldn't let them hurt you. Not after everything we've built." "Everything we built?" The words tasted like ash. I tugged at the cuffs, the metal clinking loudly in the quiet space. "You mean the career you helped me launch? The late-night talks in your office where you told me I was brave for living openly? Or the nights we spent right here, whispering that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work even with the age difference and the secrecy?" My chest ached with the memory of his hands on my face, the way he had kissed me like I was the first real thing in his carefully controlled world. Ethan looked away toward the glittering river, the sunlight catching the silver at his temples. "I never lied about loving you, Alex. But love sometimes means making choices that hurt." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder, placing it on the table between us. "Read it, then decide if you still want to walk away from me forever." I stared at the folder, my pulse roaring in my ears. Outside, the city kept moving, taxis honking, ferries crossing the water, people living their ordinary lives. Inside this bright room, my entire world was fracturing. I had trusted Ethan with my secrets, my dreams, my heart. Now the man who had been my savior was the one holding the knife. And the worst part? Some small, terrified piece of me still wanted him to be right. The folder felt heavy when he placed it in my lap. My fingers, still cuffed, fumbled with the edge. Inside were bank statements, emails, photos of men in suits I didn't recognize. But the first page stopped me cold. A police report dated 3 weeks ago. Threat against Alex Thompson. Possible hit ordered by unknown parties connected to Lumina Alliance Board. Ethan's signature was at the bottom as the reporting party. "You knew," I breathed. "You knew they were coming for me, and you didn't warn me. Instead, you staged this kidnapping." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not yet. Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to that gentle rumble I had fallen in love with. "If I had warned you, you would have run straight into their trap, trying to prove something. You're too brave for your own good, Alex. I had to get you off the board's radar. The only way was to make them think I was handling it my way, by bringing you here." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, the touch so familiar it hurt. I'm sorry it had to look like betrayal. But I swear on everything I am, I did it because I love you more than the foundation, more than my reputation, more than my own safety. I jerk my head away, the cuffs rattling. Love? This isn't love, Ethan. This is control. You've been pulling strings in my life since the day you met me at that support group for newly out guys. I thought you saw me as an equal. Turns out I was just another project. My mind flashed to my parents' house in New Jersey, the slammed door, my father's shout that no son of his would live that lifestyle. Ethan had been the one who drove me home that night, who sat with me in his car until the shaking stopped. Now that same man had me tied up like a criminal. He stood slowly, the sunlight outlining his broad shoulders. Read the rest. Then we'll talk. The guards are outside if you need anything, but you're safe here. Safer than you've been in weeks. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I never stopped being the man who believes in you, Alex. Even if right now you hate me for it. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with the folder and the unbearable weight of everything I thought I knew. The sun kept shining through the windows, warm and indifferent, while my heart cracked wide open in the middle of the brightest room I had ever been trapped in. I spent the next hour reading every page, my cuffed hands aching. The evidence was damning. Board members siphoning money to offshore accounts, threats documented, even a photo of me leaving Ethan's building late one night with the caption leverage. My stomach turned. They had been watching us. Watching me. And Ethan had known. By the time the guards brought in a tray of food I couldn't eat, my anger had settled into something colder. I had choices to make. Stay silent and let Ethan protect me, or fight my way out and finish the story that could destroy the very community we both claimed to love. Either way, the man I loved had just become the biggest complication of my life. The hours blurred into a strange kind of limbo inside that sunlit penthouse. The guards, professional, polite, almost apologetic, untied my wrists long enough for me to eat and use the bathroom, then secured me again with softer restraints. Ethan didn't return until the sky outside had shifted from bright blue to the golden haze of late afternoon. When he did, he carried 2 cups of coffee, the way he used it during our late-night editing sessions back when I was still just his protege. "Thought you might want this," he said, setting 1 cup on the table within reach. His eyes searched mine, looking for the man he knew, not the stranger glaring back. "Black, 2 sugars. Still your order?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the steam rising between us, remembering the first time he had brought me coffee. It was 5 years ago in a cramped community center in Brooklyn. I had just been kicked out by my parents after my brother found my hidden journal full of confused, terrified entries about boys. 24 years old and sleeping on a friend's couch, I showed up to the newly out support group because the shelter worker insisted. Ethan was the guest speaker that night, successful, confident, openly gay in a world that still made it hard. After the meeting, he had found me crying in the hallway and handed me a cup exactly like this one. "First rule of surviving this life," he said then, "never face the hard days without decent coffee." Now that same gesture felt like a weapon. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse from shouting earlier. "We've shared everything else, my family drama, your divorce from the marriage you entered to please your parents, the nights we spent talking until sunrise about what it means to be gay in this city. Why hide this?" Ethan sat down again, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked every one of his 45 years. "Because telling you would have put you in the crosshairs sooner. The board members aren't just stealing money, Alex. They're using it to fund political campaigns that roll back every gain the community has made. One of them has ties to the same hate group that protested outside the foundation last Pride. When my investigator told me they had your name on a list, I panicked. I called in favors I swore I'd never use again. The kidnapping was the cleanest way to get you off the street without raising suspicion." I laughed bitterly. "Clean? You had me drugged and dragged off like some mob hit. My editor is probably filing a missing persons report right now. Jake is losing his mind. Jake, my best friend since college, straight as they come, but the fiercest ally I had texted me right before the van appeared. 'Be safe out there, man. Love you like a brother.' The thought of him worrying made my stomach twist. Ethan's expression softened at the mention of Jake. I already had someone reach out anonymously. He knows you're safe, but can't know where. It's the only way to keep him out of this, too. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Remember when your father called you last year on your birthday, drunk, and saying he might be ready to talk? You were ready to run back to New Jersey and forgive everything. I stopped you because I knew it would break you again. This is the same thing. I'm stopping you from running into a fire that will consume you. The memory hit hard. My father's slurred voice on the phone. Maybe I was too hard on you, son. Had almost pulled me back into that house of conditional love. Ethan had stayed up all night talking me through it, reminding me that real family didn't make you choose between them and who you are. Now he was asking me to trust that same protection again. Only this time the cage was literal. I looked at the folder still open on the table. And what about us? The nights here, the promises we made to find a way to be together openly someday? Was any of that real, or was I just another way for you to feel like the hero of the gay community? Ethan's eyes flashed with something raw. He reached across and took my restrained hand. His thumb tracing the red mark the cuff had left. Every single moment was real. The first time you kissed me in this exact room, I knew I was gone. You're not a project, Alex. You're the reason I started questioning whether building an empire was worth losing the chance at something real. I love you. That's why I risked you hating me to keep you alive. The touch sent unwanted warmth through me despite everything. I pulled away. Love doesn't kidnap people, Ethan. It doesn't lie for weeks while I poured my heart into an investigation you knew could destroy us both. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city we both claimed as home. Maybe not in the fairy tales, but in our world, the one where parents still disown their sons, where boardrooms still whisper about those people, where one leaked photo of us could tank the foundation in your career. Sometimes love means making the ugly choice. His voice cracked on the last word. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm asking you to read the rest of that file and understand the stakes. Then decide if you still want to finish the story or if you want to walk out of here with me and find another way. The sun was dipping lower, painting the room in warm oranges and pinks that should have felt romantic. Instead, they felt like the end of something. I picked up the folder again, flipping to the next page. There, in black and white, was an email chain proving the board had hired private investigators to dig into my personal life. Photos of me at Pride with Jake, screenshots of my old social media before I learned to be careful. And at the bottom, Ethan's reply, handle it quietly. He's off limits. My breath caught. He had been fighting for me long before I even knew there was a war. But the cost was my trust, and I wasn't sure love could pay that price. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on one by one. Inside, I sat in silence with the man who had saved me and broken me in the same afternoon, wondering which version of him I was supposed to believe. Night fell fully across Manhattan, but the penthouse lights stayed soft and warm, almost mocking the storm inside me. Ethan had left again after our last conversation, promising to return at dawn with more answers. The guards rotated shifts quietly, bringing me water and a blanket like this was some twisted hotel stay. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face the day I came out, pale, tear-streaked, whispering, "We still love you," while my father stood stone-faced behind her. Ethan had driven me away that night, too, letting me crash in his guest room until I found my feet. Now that same guest room felt like a prison cell with a view. Around 2 in the morning, my phone miraculously returned to me with the SIM card removed, buzzed on the table. The guards had left it after Ethan's order. It was Jake. "Dude, some anonymous number texted me you're safe, but laying low. What the hell is going on? Call me when you can. I'm worried sick." I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Jake had been my rock through everything. The awkward first dates after coming out, the panic attacks, even the night I admitted I was falling for Ethan. Age gap or not, if he treats you right, I'm happy for you, Jake had said then, clapping me on the back. Just don't let the rich guy turn you into a kept boy. Now I wish I could tell him everything, but Ethan was right about one thing. Dragging Jake in would only paint a target on his back, too. When Ethan finally returned at sunrise, he looked like he hadn't slept either. He carried fresh clothes, my own jeans and hoodie from my apartment, which meant someone had gone there. The thought of strangers in my space sent another wave of violation through me. I had my assistant pack them. He explained quickly, reading my face. No one else touched your things. He uncuffed me completely this time and motioned toward the bathroom. Shower. Change. Then we talk like adults. The hot water felt like a mercy. For 10 minutes, I stood under the spray, trying to wash away the confusion, but it only made the questions louder. When I came out dressed in my own clothes, Ethan had set up breakfast on the dining table, bagels, fruit, the good coffee from the place on 8th Avenue we used to grab together. It was so normal it hurt. Sit, he said gently. I owe you the full story. I sat, arms crossed. Start with why you didn't trust me enough to include me in your plan. Ethan poured cream into my coffee exactly the way I liked it, because you would have insisted on going public immediately. Your integrity is one of the things I love most about you, Alex, but it's also what makes you reckless. The board has connections in City Hall. One wrong move, and the entire Lumina Alliance collapses. Thousands of kids losing scholarships, shelters closing, legal aid disappearing. I couldn't risk that, so I made the call to remove you from the equation temporarily while I worked with the DA's office quietly. He slid a new document across the table. This one had official seals. I've been feeding them information for months. The kidnapping bought us time to build an airtight case. But there's more. His voice dropped. One of the board members found out about us. He threatened to leak photos to every tabloid in the city unless I stopped your investigation. I couldn't let him destroy you the way my ex-wife's family tried to destroy me when I came out during our divorce. So I did what I had to do. The room felt smaller. I remembered the stories Ethan had shared about his marriage, a desperate attempt to please his conservative parents, the ugly custody battle over his daughter who still barely spoke to him. He had lost so much to live honestly. Now he was risking the rest for me. But why the theatrics? I asked, voice quieter now. The van, the drugs, the cuffs. You could have just asked me to lay low. Ethan's laugh was tired. Would you have listened? You were obsessed with this story. You told me last week it was your chance to prove to your father that being gay doesn't make you weak. I knew you'd push harder if I asked nicely. So I made the choice for both of us. He reached across and covered my hand with his. This time I didn't pull away. I'm sorry it hurt you, but I'd rather you hate me alive than love me dead. The words landed like stones in still water. Outside, the city woke up, commuters streaming toward subways, vendors opening carts, the normal rhythm of New York life. Inside, I was facing the man who had become my family when blood failed me. My best friend, my lover, my mentor, all wrapped in one complicated package, who had just admitted to orchestrating my worst nightmare for my own good. I need air, I said suddenly, standing. Not freedom, just the balcony. Ethan nodded to the guards through the glass. They opened the sliding door, but stayed inside. I stepped out into the cool morning breeze, gripping the railing. 23 stories below, the world kept turning. Somewhere down there, my editor was probably calling every hospital. My mother might have seen the news and wondered if her gay son had finally gotten what she secretly feared. And Ethan stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence like a shield. You're not alone in this anymore, he said softly, joining me at the railing. Whatever you decide, finish the story, walk away from journalism, even walk away from me. I'll support it. But I won't apologize for keeping you safe. I turned to face him. The sunlight caught the worry lines around his eyes, the slight tremble in his hand as he reached to touch my arm. In that moment, he wasn't the powerful philanthropist or the secretive manipulator. He was just a man who loved another man in a world that still made that dangerous. And I was the man who had to decide if love was enough to rebuild trust from the rubble. I don't know what I feel right now, I admitted, but I know I don't want to lose you either. Not completely. Ethan's shoulders sagged with visible relief. That's enough for today. We'll figure out the rest together. For the first time since the blindfold came off, I believed him. The next 3 days passed in a strange rhythm of guarded conversations and tentative steps toward understanding. Ethan gave me full access to the penthouse, kitchen, books, even my laptop with internet restricted to non-investigative sites. The guards remained, but kept their distance. I spent hours on the balcony watching the river, replaying every moment of our relationship like a film on loop. The way Ethan had shown up at my first big article launch, with flowers hidden in a briefcase. The weekend we drove upstate to a quiet cabin where no one knew us, and we could hold hands in public. The night he told me, voice cracking, that I made him believe in second chances after his family had turned their backs. On the fourth morning, my phone, SIM restored under strict rules, lit up with a text from my mother. Alex, we saw the news about you missing. Your father won't admit it, but he's worried. Please call when you can. We love you. The words blurred. 5 years of near silence, and now a kidnapping scare was what it took to crack the wall. I showed the message to Ethan over breakfast. He read it twice, then set the phone down gently. You should call her, but maybe wait until we have a plan. The board still thinks I'm handling you. One wrong word, and this whole thing unravels. I nodded, but the urge to hear her voice was almost physical. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning since the folder. What happens to us when this is over? If the DA takes down the board, the foundation survives, the story runs, can we actually be together? Or will we always be sneaking around because your donors might clutch their pearls at the age gap and the optics? Ethan set his coffee down and looked at me across the table, sunlight turning his eyes almost silver. I've been thinking about that every night since I put you in that van. I'm tired of hiding, Alex. After this is over, I want to go public. Take you to the next gala as my partner. Introduce you to my daughter properly. Let the world see that the man who built Lumina Alliance also gets to have a life outside it. He reached for my hand again, and this time I let him take it. But only if you still want me after everything I put you through. The honesty in his voice chipped away at the last of my anger. I thought about Jake's texts, daily check-ins full of bad jokes to keep my spirits up, about my father's grudging worry, about the kids the foundation helped who would lose everything if the story exploded the wrong way. Ethan hadn't just saved me. He had saved all of them too, at the cost of my trust. That afternoon, he took a risk and let me call Jake on speaker with strict instructions. Hey man, Jake's voice filled the room, thick with relief. You sound okay. What the hell happened? And who's the mysterious benefactor guy who texted me? I glanced at Ethan, who nodded once. It's complicated, but I'm safe. I'll explain everything when I can. Just keep believing in me, okay? Jake laughed, the sound so normal it made my chest ache. Always, bro. And tell that rich mentor of yours I owe him one for keeping you alive. Love you. When the call ended, Ethan looked at me with new respect. He's a good friend. You're lucky. I know, I said quietly. I'm lucky in a lot of ways. That night we sat on the couch watching the city lights, closer than we had been since the kidnapping. No touching beyond shoulders brushing, but it felt like progress. Ethan told me stories about starting the foundation in his 30s, fresh out of his disastrous marriage, determined to create the support system he never had. I told him about the nights I drove past my parents' house just to feel close, never daring to knock. For the first time since the blindfold came off, the conversation felt like us again. Two men trying to figure out how to love each other in a world that kept testing us. But peace never lasted long in my life. On the 5th day, a guard knocked urgently. Sir, we have a situation. One of the board members just called your private line. He wants to meet. Says he has proof you're protecting Thompson, and if you don't deliver him by tomorrow, he's going public with everything, including photos. Ethan's face went pale. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a real fear in his eyes. Alex, this is it. The moment we've been waiting for. But it means I have to pretend I'm handing you over. Are you ready to trust me one more time? My heart raced, but looking at the man who had risked everything for me, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was choosing. I'm ready, I said. But this time we do it together. No more secrets. Ethan pulled me into a tight hug, the first real one since the ordeal began. In his arms, with the city sparkling below us, I felt the first real spark of hope since the cuffs had clicked shut. Whatever came next, we would face it as equals. Two gay men who had learned that love sometimes required the hardest choices, but never required giving up on each other. The plan was simple on paper, but terrifying in practice. Ethan would arrange a meeting at an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn that the foundation owned, neutral ground. I would be delivered in handcuffs, playing the part of the angry captive. Undercover agents the DEA had embedded would be waiting nearby. One wrong word, and the whole thing could collapse, but Ethan had spent years building quiet alliances. Now they would pay off. We spent the evening rehearsing. He showed me exactly how to act, defiant but scared, the way I had felt that first day. They need to believe I'm sacrificing you to save the foundation, he explained, voice steady even though his hand shook slightly. It's the only way to get the confession on record. I nodded, but inside my stomach was in knots. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. This was the man I loved putting both our futures on the line. At midnight, we left the penthouse in a black SUV with tinted windows. The city lights blurred past as we crossed the bridge, Ethan's hand resting on my knee the entire way. Whatever happens, he said softly, know that I love you. The real kind. The kind that doesn't end when things get ugly. I squeezed his hand back. I know, and I love you too, even when I wanted to hate you. The warehouse was dark when we arrived, but the moment the car doors opened, bright floodlights snapped on. 3 board members stood waiting, smug expressions melting into surprise when they saw Ethan escorting me personally. Caldwell, the lead one, sneered. Richard Harlan, the same man whose signature was on half the shady transfers. I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you to turn on your little boy toy. Ethan's grip on my arm tightened, but his voice stayed ice cold. Business is business, Richard. You threatened the foundation. I'm protecting what matters. He shoved me forward roughly, part of the act, and I stumbled, falling to my knees on the concrete. The impact stung, but I kept my head down, playing the broken journalist. Harlan laughed and pulled out his phone. Good. Now let's finish this. I want the confession recorded so we can bury the investigation for good. He pressed record. Admit it, Caldwell. You've been skimming too, haven't you? All those anonymous donations to shelters were just your way of laundering money while preaching equality. Ethan stepped forward, voice rising in perfect outrage. You think I'd risk everything I built for pocket change? You're the one who's been funneling money to anti-gay PACs while pretending to be an ally. I have the proof. Every wire transfer, every email. The DA is already moving on it. Harlan's face twisted. He lunged, but before he could reach Ethan, federal agents swarmed from every shadow. Shouts, handcuffs clicking, the whole chaotic ballet of justice unfolding under the warehouse lights. I stayed on my knees, heart pounding, until familiar hands helped me up. Ethan's. He pulled me into his chest, right there in front of everyone. No more hiding. It's over, he whispered into my hair. We did it. The next hours were a blur of statements and debriefs. By the time the sun rose again, the 3 board members were in custody and the full story was already leaking to every major outlet. My editor called, voice shaking with excitement. Thompson, this is Pulitzer territory. Get your ass back here. But the real victory wasn't the headlines. It was standing on the warehouse loading dock with Ethan as the city woke up around us, his arm around my shoulders in plain sight. No more secrets, he said quietly. From now on, we face everything together. I turned to him, the morning light catching the relief on his face. Together, I agreed, and for the first time since the kidnapping, the word felt like a promise instead of cage. We drove back to the penthouse in silence, but it was the comfortable kind. When we stepped inside, the guards were gone. The space felt different, lighter, like the shadows had finally lifted. Ethan pulled me close the moment the door closed, not in passion, but in simple, bone-deep gratitude. Thank you for trusting me when I didn't deserve it. I rested my forehead against his. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't see the battlefield. In that sunlit room where everything had started, we stood holding each other, 2 men who had walked through fire and emerged still choosing love. The weeks that followed moved at whirlwind speed. The Lumina Alliance board was cleaned out, new leadership appointed, and my story ran on the front page of every major paper in the country. Gay journalist exposes corruption inside LGBT foundation. Hero mentor stands by his side. The headline made me cringe and smile at the same time. Ethan and I went public the day it dropped, attending a press conference hand in hand. The questions were brutal: age gap, power imbalance, optics, but we answered every one honestly. For the first time in my life, I felt completely seen. My parents called the same afternoon. My mother cried. My father cleared his throat a lot and finally said, "We're proud of you, son. Both of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Jake showed up at the penthouse with pizza and beer, hugging Ethan like an old friend. "You hurt him again, and I'll bury you," he joked, but his eyes were serious. Ethan just nodded, man to man. One quiet evening we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the Hudson gold. Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver band engraved with our initials and the date of the kidnapping. Our private reminder that even the worst day had led to the best version of us. "Not asking for forever yet," he said softly. "Just asking if you'll keep walking this road with me." I slipped the ring on and kissed him right there in the open air. No more hiding. I'm in. All the way. Life wasn't suddenly easy. There were still donor meetings where people raised eyebrows, family dinners where old wounds surfaced, and nights when the memory of handcuffs made me wake up sweating. But we faced them together, talking, fighting, forgiving, growing. I learned that trust isn't given once. It's rebuilt every day. Ethan learned that love sometimes means stepping back and letting the person you love stand on their own. We both learned that being gay in America still requires courage. But courage is easier when you have someone who sees your scars and calls them beautiful. The foundation thrived under new leadership. I moved from investigative work to mentoring young journalists, paying forward what Ethan had given me. And every morning when I woke up next to him in that sunlit penthouse, I remembered the man who had once broken my trust to save my life, and realized the real shock wasn't the betrayal. It was how deeply love could heal when both people chose to fight for it. True or false? Sometimes the greatest acts of love look exactly like betrayal until you understand the sacrifice behind them.